The medical bay gleamed under harsh white lights as Dr. Zelthion pressed his chitinous fingers against the scanning device. He had been analyzing genetic samples for 300 cycles, but nothing prepared him for what floated in the containment field before him. Human DNA. The most peculiar biological code he had ever encountered. Commander Varthis entered the laboratory with heavy steps that echoed through the sterile chamber. His scales reflected the blue glow from dozens of monitors displaying genetic sequences. He was a warrior, not a scientist, but even he understood the importance of what they had discovered. "What did you find?" Varthis asked, his voice a low rumble that made the equipment vibrate slightly. Zelthion did not turn from his work. His compound eyes remained fixed on the spiraling double helix rotating in three-dimensional space. "Everything and nothing. Commander, this human's genetic code contains contradictions that should not exist." The human subject remained unconscious in the medical pod nearby. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chen. Apa, Aya, a xenobiologist who had been captured during a research expedition to the outer colonies. She wore a simple gray jumpsuit, and monitoring cables ran from her temples to banks of alien machinery. Her breathing was steady, her vital signs stable. But she had been sedated for the past 14 hours while the Crithian science team performed their analysis. Varthis moved closer to the holographic display. Numbers and symbols cascaded down the screen in patterns that meant nothing to his military mind. "Explain it in terms I can understand." Zelthion finally turned, all four of his eyes focusing on the commander. Humans should not be alive. Their DNA contains ancient viral fragments, non-coding sequences that make up most of their genome, and repair mechanisms that are both efficient and catastrophically flawed. They develop cancers regularly, their cells have programmed death timers, and yet they possess remarkable regenerative capabilities in specific tissues. And this is unusual? Commander, every other species in the galactic community has optimized genetic code, clean, efficient, logical. The Crithians evolved with redundant organ systems. The Veltorians have perfect cellular replication. The Marinthians never develop tumors. Humans are a mess of evolutionary compromises held together by molecular tape and hope. Flow. Varthis clicked his jaw plates together, a sign of impatience. Then they are weak. Why does High Command care about weak creatures? Zelthion returned his attention to the display and brought up a new set of data. Red highlights appeared across the human genome like warning signals. Because weakness is not the same as fragility, Commander. Look at this section here. This is the human immune system, genetic architecture. The display zoomed into a specific chromosomal region, complex protein structures unfolded like origami, showing receptor sites and antibody production centers. The human immune system is not just a defense mechanism. It is a learning engine. Every pathogen they encounter gets logged, analyzed, and countered. Their bodies remember infections from decades ago and can respond within hours to new variations of old threats. Many species have adaptive immunity, Varthis said. Not like this. Zelthion's voice carried a note of something the commander had never heard from the scientist before. Fear. Human immune systems do not just adapt, they weaponize. They can recognize cancer cells and destroy them. They can identify foreign tissue and reject it. In some cases, human immune responses are so aggressive they attack the body itself, creating autoimmune conditions that would kill most species but humans simply manage as chronic conditions. Varthis stared at the unconscious human. She looked so small, so harmless. Her species stood barely 2 meters tall on average, had no natural armor, no claws, no venom. They were physically unremarkable in almost every measurable way. Yet 3 Crithian soldiers had died capturing her, and she had been unarmed. There is more, Zelthion continued. He brought up another section of analysis. Human muscles contain a safety mechanism. Their brains limit the amount of force their muscles can exert to prevent self-injury. But in extreme stress situations, this limiter releases. Humans can temporarily access strength levels that damage their own skeletal and muscular systems. They call it hysterical strength. They harm themselves to achieve greater power? Not intentionally. It is an emergency override. But yes, humans have biological systems that will sacrifice long-term health for short-term survival. Their adrenal response is particularly interesting. The display showed hormone cascades and neural pathway activations. When threatened, humans flood their systems with chemicals that suppress pain, increase reaction time, enhance strength, and improve focus. They literally become more dangerous when injured or afraid. We found elevated adrenaline markers in Dr. Chen's system from when she was captured. Even sedated, her body maintains higher baseline stress hormones than most species produce during active combat. Varthus felt his scales ripple with involuntary unease. He had read the reports from the capture team. Dr. Chen had fought with improvised weapons and tactical awareness that seemed impossible for a non-military scientist. She had used equipment from her research station to create traps and had injured multiple soldiers before being subdued by overwhelming numbers. What about their intelligence? Varthus asked. Surely that is their primary advantage. Zelthion made a gesture of uncertainty with his secondary arms. Their brains are paradoxes, like the rest of them. Humans have enormous prefrontal cortices for planning and abstract thought, yet they retain powerful limbic systems that generate strong emotional responses. They are simultaneously logical and irrational. Their decision-making is influenced by chemical states that change by the hour. He pulled up neurological scans taken while Dr. Chen was conscious. Look at the activity patterns. Humans process information through multiple simultaneous pathways. They use logic, emotion, pattern recognition, and intuition all at once. It creates inconsistent results, but it also generates creative solutions that pure logic cannot achieve. Mono people, you are saying they are unpredictable. Dangerously so, Commander. Zelthion's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But there is something else. Something I discovered only an hour ago. He brought up a new display that showed comparative genetic analysis. On one side was Dr. Chen's DNA. On the other were samples from various species across the galaxy. Red lines connected specific sequences between them. What am I looking at? Varthus demanded. Genetic echoes, fragments of code that appear across multiple species. Most scientists believe these are contamination or coincidence. But I ran deep analysis on the human sample and found something remarkable. He highlighted several sections. These sequences in human DNA match genetic markers found in 43 different sapient species. Not similar, identical. Varthus felt his blood run cold. That is impossible. Species from different worlds cannot share identical genetic code. Exactly, unless something deliberately placed those sequences there. Commander, I believe human DNA was engineered. Not recently, but millions of years ago. Someone or something took genetic material from across the galaxy and wove it into the developing human genome on their homeworld. For what purpose? I do not know. But it explains the contradictions. Humans are not a naturally evolved species optimized for their environment. They are a collection of genetic traits borrowed from dozens of other species and combined in ways that should not work but somehow do. They have the regenerative markers found in Thelonian warriors. They have stress response genes similar to Vraxian hunters. They have social cooperation neural patterns that match hive collective drones, but without the suppressed individuality. Zelthion turned to face the commander directly, all four eyes dilated with intensity. Commander, humans are not just another species. They are a genetic archive. A living repository of traits from across known space, assembled into a single biological package, and whoever created them gave them one more gift. What gift? Adaptability. Not just immune adaptation, but genetic flexibility. Human DNA mutates at a higher rate than most species, not enough to destabilize their genome, but enough to allow rapid evolutionary responses to environmental pressures. In their short time as a spacefaring species, humans have already begun showing genetic variations between colony populations. They are evolving in real time. Varthus looked at the sleeping human with new understanding. She was not a weak creature. She was a weapon, a biological tool created by some ancient intelligence, and left to develop on a forgotten world until they reached the stars. "Does High Command know about this?" he asked. "I sent my preliminary findings. They ordered complete analysis before we wake her." "And when we wake her?" Zelthion made a gesture of uncertainty. "That depends on what else I find. Commander, there are sections of human DNA I cannot analyze, sequences that appear to be dormant or locked behind genetic triggers. I do not know what they do, and I have no way to safely test them without risking the subject's life." "Then do not test them. Complete your analysis of what you can measure and prepare a full report." As Varthus turned to leave, an alarm began shrieking through the medical bay. Red lights flashed across every console. Zelthion spun back to his instruments, his clawed hands flying across controls. "What is happening?" Varthus shouted over the noise. "She is waking up. The sedation is failing. Her metabolism is processing the drugs faster than I calculated." The commander rushed to the medical pod and saw Dr. Chen's eyes moving rapidly beneath closed lids. Her heart rate had tripled. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. The monitoring equipment showed neural activity spiking across all regions of her brain. "Increase the sedation." "I am trying." "Her liver is breaking down the compounds as fast as I administer them." "Commander, she should not be able to do this. The amount of sedative in her system would keep a Krithian soldier unconscious for days." Dr. Chen's eyes opened. They were dark brown, almost black, and they focused on Zelthion with startling clarity. She did not thrash or panic. She simply looked at the alien scientist and spoke in clear, calm galactic standard. "Where am I? And what have you done to my crew?" Varthus stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. "You are on the Krithian research vessel Eternal Conquest. Your research team is in detention. You will answer our questions." Dr. Chen turned her head slowly to look at him. The cables attached to her temples pulled taut. "I am a civilian scientist, conducting authorized research in neutral space. Your attack violated 6 different treaties. The Galactic Council will hear about this. The Council is far away, human. You will cooperate." Something changed in Dr. Chen's expression. Not fear. Not anger. Something colder and more dangerous. "No," she said simply. Then she moved. Despite the restraints, despite the sedation still flooding her system, despite being surrounded by armed soldiers and sophisticated security measures, Dr. Sarah Chen acted. She twisted her wrist in a way that looked impossible and dislocated her own thumb to slip free of one restraint. Her other hand grabbed the monitoring cable attached to her temple and yanked it free, ignoring the blood that ran down her face. Alarms screamed louder. Varthus drew his weapon, but Dr. Chen had already rolled out of the medical pod with speed that seemed to defy the drugs in her system. She landed in a crouch, one hand pressing against the floor for balance, while the other grabbed a medical scanner and hurled it at Zelthion's head. The scientist ducked, and the device shattered against the wall behind him, spraying components and sparks. Guards rushed into the room, their weapons raised, but Dr. Chen was already moving again. She grabbed a tray of surgical instruments and used it as a shield as energy bolts sizzled through the air. "Stun her. Do not kill her," Varthus roared. But stunning Dr. Sarah Chen proved difficult. She moved with efficiency and precision that spoke of training far beyond what any civilian researcher should possess. She used the medical bay's equipment as cover and weapons, staying ahead of the slower Krithian soldiers by anticipating their movements and exploiting the split-second delays in their responses. Zelthion watched in horror and fascination as the human demonstrated exactly what his genetic analysis had revealed. She was adapting to the situation in real time, learning the guards' patterns, using her smaller size and flexibility to avoid capture. Her body was still processing sedatives that should have rendered her unconscious, yet she fought with focus and determination that suggested her pain receptors were barely functioning. Finally, overwhelming numbers prevailed. 6 guards managed to corner Dr. Chen against a wall, and one landed a direct stun blast that finally dropped her to her knees. But even as she fell, she was reaching for another improvised weapon, her mind still calculating escape routes even as consciousness left her. When she collapsed, blood ran from her nose and ears. The biomonitors showed her system was in shock from the combination of sedatives, adrenaline, and stun energy. But her heart kept beating, her lungs kept breathing, her body began immediate repairs to the damage she had sustained. Varthis stood over the unconscious human, his weapon still drawn. "Your analysis, Dr. Zelthion. I want it completed within the next 6 hours, and I want to know everything about what makes these creatures so dangerous." Zelthion looked at the data streaming across his displays, showing the incredible biological responses Dr. Chen's body had mounted during her brief escape attempt. "Commander, I already know what makes them dangerous. They refuse to stop. Every biological system, every genetic trait, every evolutionary adaptation is designed for one purpose: survival. Humans do not have the strongest bodies or the most advanced minds in the galaxy, but they have something more valuable." "What?" "They have the stubborn, irrational, genetically encoded refusal to accept defeat, and someone engineered them that way deliberately. The question we should be asking is not what makes them dangerous. The question is who created them, and for what purpose." In the silence that followed, Dr. Sarah Chen's unconscious body was secured with restraints designed for subjects 3 times her size. Her vital signs stabilized, and the medical monitors showed her metabolism already processing the stun weapon's effects. By every medical standard, she should have remained unconscious for hours. She woke up 40 minutes later, and this time, she did not try to escape. She simply stared at the ceiling and waited. Because humans were patient, too, and patience, combined with the refusal to quit, made them the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The interrogation room was smaller than Dr. Sarah Chen expected. Gray walls, a single table, 2 chairs, and lighting that was slightly too bright for human comfort. She sat with her hands folded on the table. The restraints gone now, but replaced with something worse. A neural suppression collar around her neck that prevented aggressive action. It would detect hostile intent and deliver a paralyzing shock before she could act on it. Commander Varthis sat across from her, his reptilian features unreadable by human standards. Dr. Zelthion stood in the corner, his compound eyes tracking her every movement with scientific interest that made her skin crawl. "You are very calm for a prisoner," Varthis observed. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Panic is not productive. You want something from me or you would have killed me already. So let's skip the intimidation and get to the actual conversation." Zelthion made a clicking sound that might have been amusement. "She is correct, Commander. Human stress response includes enhanced logical thinking in some individuals. Fear makes her more capable, not less. I want to know about your species," Varthis said, ignoring the scientist. "Your homeworld, your military capabilities, your expansion plans." Sarah leaned back in her chair as much as the collar allowed. "You captured a civilian researcher to ask about military intelligence? That's either spectacularly poor planning, or you're after something else entirely. Which is it?" The commander's scales rippled with irritation. "You will answer the questions. I'm a xenobiologist specializing in extremophile organisms. I study bacteria that live in volcanic vents. I can tell you about sulfur-based metabolic pathways and thermophilic protein structures. I cannot tell you about human military capabilities because I don't know them. I've never even been to Earth." This last statement made both aliens pause. Zelthion stepped forward, his claws clicking on the metal floor. "You were born off-world? Mars Colony 7, 3rd generation. My grandparents left Earth before I was born. I've spent my entire life on space stations and research outposts." Varthis exchanged a look with Zelthion. The scientist approached the table with renewed interest. "And yet you fought trained soldiers with improvised weapons and nearly escaped a secured medical facility. Where did a bacteria researcher learn combat skills?" Sarah smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You want to know the secret of humanity? Fine. I'll tell you. Every human learns to fight, not because we're warriors, but because we grow up on stories of people who refuse to quit. We're raised on tales of ordinary people who did extraordinary things when they had no other choice. My grandmother survived the Mars riots. My mother worked as an engineer in deep space for 20 years. I learned to fight because everyone I grew up with learned to fight. It's what we do. Explain, Zelthion demanded, his scientific curiosity overriding protocol. Sarah considered her words carefully. The collar would shock her if she tried to attack, but it could not stop her from speaking truth. Humans don't have natural weapons. We're not the fastest, strongest, or most durable species, but we have something that apparently terrifies the rest of the galaxy. We have culture. We pass down knowledge, skills, and determination across generations. Every human child learns about ancestors who crossed oceans in wooden boats, who climbed mountains because they were there, who went to space on controlled explosions. She leaned forward, and Varthis unconsciously leaned back. We tell stories about people who were told something was impossible, and did it anyway. We celebrate failure followed by success. We honor stubbornness and persistence. By the time a human is 10 years old, they've absorbed hundreds of stories about why you never give up. It's not genetic, Commander. It's cultural, and culture is more powerful than genetics. Zelthion's eyes widened with understanding. Cultural inheritance. You pass behavioral traits through teaching and storytelling rather than purely through biology. Every species does that to some degree, Varthis protested. Not like humans, Sarah said. Ask your scientist. He's been analyzing my DNA. Has he told you what he found? The commander turned to Zelthion, who shifted uncomfortably under the attention. The human genome contains fragments from dozens of other species. Ancient genetic engineering, on a scale we cannot fully understand. Sarah nodded slowly. I don't know if that's true. But it would explain some things. Humans are adaptable because we have to be. Our bodies are makeshift solutions to problems. Our minds are chaotic processing centers that use logic and emotion simultaneously. We're not optimized for anything except survival through adaptation. And what does that make you? Varthis asked. Dangerous. Sarah's voice was quiet but carried absolute certainty. Because we don't just adapt individually. We adapt collectively. When one human figures out how to solve a problem, we teach everyone else. When one human develops a skill, we share it. You know what humanity's greatest invention is? Not starships or computers or weapons. It's writing, the ability to pass knowledge across time and space without personal contact. Every human has access to thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. Zelthion made rapid notes on a datapad. Collective intelligence. A hive mind without the biological integration. We call it civilization, Sarah corrected. And it's more effective than a hive mind, because individuals can still innovate. We cooperate without losing autonomy. We share knowledge without enforced conformity. Varthis stood abruptly, his patience exhausted. Enough philosophy. Tell me about human military forces. Numbers, locations, capabilities. I told you. I don't know military details. But I can tell you this. If you're planning to attack humanity, you'll lose. Not because our weapons are better or our soldiers are stronger. You'll lose because humans are vindictive. We remember injuries across generations. We hold grudges for centuries. And we have a really bad habit of uniting against common enemies. The commander activated a holographic display above the table. It showed a star map with hundreds of systems highlighted. Humanity occupies 73 systems. The Crithian Empire controls over 3,000. Your species is insignificant in the larger galaxy. Sarah studied the map with genuine interest. You're right. We're small, new, technologically behind most species, but you know what? That's what makes us dangerous. We're the underdog. And humans love being the underdog because it means we have something to prove. She pointed at one of the human systems. That colony there, Ross 128. It was attacked by pirates 5 years ago. Small raid, minimal damage. You know what humanity did? We didn't just defend that one colony. We created a volunteer defense force that now protects dozens of systems. We turned a small attack into an excuse to build infrastructure and organization. Zelthion leaned closer to the display. Humans weaponize adversity. We learn from it, Sarah said. Every problem becomes a lesson. Every attack becomes justification for defense. Every failure becomes motivation for improvement. You want to know why you should fear humanity? Because we get stronger every time we're hit. We adapt faster than evolution. We share solutions faster than natural selection. We're a species that turned being chased by predators into an Olympic sport. Varthis deactivated the hologram. Your bravado does not change your situation. You are a prisoner. Your research team is detained. Your government does not know where you are. Actually, they do. Sarah's expression remained neutral. Or, they will soon. I activated a distress beacon before your soldiers captured me. It's on a delayed transmission, standard protocol for research teams in contested space. By now, human ships are probably investigating my last known location. The commander's eyes narrowed. You are lying. Maybe. Or maybe I'm telling the truth. That's the thing about humans. We plan ahead. We have contingencies for our contingencies, and we're really good at making other species think we're bluffing, when we're not. Zelthion interrupted before Varthis could respond. Commander, I need to complete my analysis. The human should return to medical confinement. Varthis gestured to guards waiting outside. Take her back. Maximum security this time. As the guards escorted Sarah from the interrogation room, she turned back to look at Zelthion. Doctor, a piece of advice. Whatever you think you've found in my DNA, it's only part of the story. Genetics explain potential. Culture determines reality. And human culture is built on one fundamental principle. Never surrender. The door sealed behind her, leaving the two aliens alone. Varthis turned to Zelthion with barely controlled frustration. She told us nothing useful. On the contrary, Commander, she told us everything. The scientist pulled up his datapad and began entering notes. She confirmed that human adaptability is not just biological. It is social, cultural, and technological. They share knowledge at a pace that allows behavioral evolution to occur within single generations, rather than across millions of years. That makes them a greater threat? Potentially. But it also reveals a vulnerability. Zelthion displayed a complex genetic diagram. I found something in my continued analysis. Human DNA contains dormant sequences that respond to environmental triggers. Most species have some junk DNA. Humans have enormous amounts of it. But what if it is not junk? What if those sequences activate under specific conditions? Varthis studied the diagram without comprehension. What kind of conditions? That is what I intend to discover. With your permission, Commander, I want to expose the human to various stimuli and observe how her genetic expression changes. Nothing harmful, just environmental factors that might trigger dormant traits. Do it. High Command wants a complete assessment before they decide how to handle the human problem. But as Zelthion returned to his laboratory, his mind raced with possibilities and concerns. Sarah Chen had been captured because intelligence suggested she was involved in classified research. But reviewing her file more carefully, Zelthion realized something disturbing. Dr. Chen was not a military scientist. She was not connected to any defense program. She studied simple organisms in extreme environments. Unless her research was not what it appeared to be, unless humanity had disguised military biological research as civilian science, unless Dr. Sarah Chen knew exactly what secrets lay hidden in human DNA, and had been deliberately allowing herself to be captured to see what the Crithians would discover. The thought made Zelthion's skin crawl. If humans were advanced enough to hide military research inside civilian programs, if they were clever enough to use their own people as living intelligence-gathering tools, then the Crithian Empire faced an opponent far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. He entered his laboratory and began preparing new tests. But even as he worked, doubt gnawed at him. Sarah Chen had been too calm, too willing to talk, too ready with answers that seemed candid, but revealed little. She had controlled the entire interrogation by appearing to cooperate while actually directing the conversation exactly where she wanted it to go. Humans called it misdirection. They were apparently very good at it. In her cell, Sarah Chen sat on a narrow bunk and reviewed her situation. The collar prevented physical aggression, but it did not stop her from thinking. She had been captured, as planned. The Crithians were analyzing her DNA, as expected. And they were asking the wrong questions, as intended, because Sarah Chen was not just a xenobiologist. She was part of a program that few people in the human government even knew about. A program designed to answer one critical question. Why did humanity's genetic code look like it had been engineered? Who had done it? When? And for what purpose? The research was classified beyond black. The implications were too dangerous. If humanity had been created by some ancient intelligence as a genetic archive or biological weapon, then everything about human history and identity came into question. And if other species discovered this truth, they might decide that humans were too dangerous to allow to exist. So Sarah and others like her had volunteered to be captured, to let other species analyze human DNA, to observe what they found and how they reacted, to gather intelligence about galactic biological knowledge while appearing to be simple prisoners. It was risky, potentially fatal, but necessary. The Crithians were not the first to capture her, and they would not be the last. Each species had different scientific capabilities, different analytical techniques, different reactions to what they found in human genetics. Sarah's job was to survive, observe, and eventually escape with intelligence about how much the Crithians understood. So far, Dr. Zelthion was proving more perceptive than most. He had found the dormant sequences faster than expected. But he was asking the wrong questions about them. He thought they were evolutionary remnants or fail-safe mechanisms. He did not yet understand what they truly were. Instructions. Genetic code that would activate when humanity reached certain developmental milestones. Abilities that would manifest when humans encountered specific situations or stimuli. Potential that had been locked away for millions of years, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And that moment was approaching faster than anyone realized. Because Sarah Chen was not the only human who had started experiencing strange symptoms lately. Heightened intuition, enhanced pattern recognition, occasional flashes of knowledge that seemed to come from nowhere. Subtle abilities that might be random mutation, or might be genetic programs finally activating after eons of dormancy. Humanity was changing, evolving, becoming whatever they had been designed to become. And Sarah needed to understand what that meant before the rest of the galaxy discovered the truth. She lay down on the bunk and closed her eyes, knowing the Crithians were monitoring her vital signs. Let them watch. Let them see a human resting calmly despite captivity. Let them wonder why she was not afraid. Because Sarah Chen had learned long ago that fear was just another tool, and humans were very, very good at using tools. The laboratory hummed with activity as Dr. Zelthion prepared his experiments. He had spent the past 18 hours reviewing every piece of data collected from Dr. Sarah Chen, and the patterns he discovered both fascinated and terrified him. The human genome was not just a collection of borrowed traits. It was a carefully constructed biological machine with purposes he was only beginning to understand. Sarah stood in the center of the testing chamber, still wearing the neural suppression collar, but otherwise unrestrained. Around her, sensors monitored everything from her brain waves to her cellular metabolism. Zelthion watched from behind a reinforced observation window, his clawed fingers dancing across control interfaces. We will begin with baseline environmental tests, Zelthion announced through the intercom. Please remain calm and cooperative. Sarah nodded, her expression neutral. What are you looking for, Doctor? Genetic activation patterns. Your DNA contains sequences that appear dormant. I theorize they respond to specific stimuli. I intend to discover what those stimuli are. The first test involved temperature variation. The chamber grew hot, then cold, cycling through extremes that would have been uncomfortable for most species. Sarah's body responded predictably, sweating to cool down and shivering to generate heat. But Zelthion noticed something interesting in the genetic scans. Specific gene clusters showed increased activity during temperature stress, ramping up protein production for thermal regulation, far beyond what should have been necessary. Your body is overcompensating, Zelthion observed. You are adapting to environmental stress, even though the stress is not severe enough to require such dramatic adaptation. Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead. Humans evolved in Africa, then spread to every climate on Earth. We're built to handle environmental variation. No, Zelthian said, studying his data with growing excitement. This is not normal variation handling. Your cells are actively modifying their function in real time. Gene expression is changing at a rate I have never observed in any species. It is almost as if your DNA is testing different configurations to find optimal responses. The next test involved atmospheric composition. Zelthion gradually reduced oxygen levels to see how Sarah's body compensated. Most species showed predictable responses at predictable thresholds. Sarah's body did something different. Her blood chemistry altered to maximize oxygen extraction efficiency. Her cellular metabolism shifted to require less oxygen. Her brain activity actually increased slightly, as if the stress was enhancing rather than inhibiting neural function. Impossible, Zelthion muttered. Cognitive function should decline with reduced oxygen. Yours is improving. Sarah took slow, deep breaths. But her voice was steady. Humans have climbed mountains over 8,000 meters tall. Our bodies know how to function with limited oxygen. Some populations have lived at high altitudes for generations and developed genetic adaptations. This is not genetic adaptation from altitude living. Zelthion brought up cellular scans, showing rapid changes at the molecular level. This is active genetic reprogramming, happening within minutes. Dr. Chen, your cells are rewriting their own operating instructions in response to environmental pressure. Do you understand how extraordinary that is? Sarah said nothing, but her heart rate increased slightly. Zelthion noticed and filed the observation away. The human knew something. She was not surprised by these results. The third test was psychological stress. Zelthion had hesitated to include it. But he needed to understand how human genetics responded to mental, rather than physical pressure. He activated a holographic scenario in the chamber. Threatening images appeared around Sarah. Simulated combat situations, predators attacking, disasters unfolding. It was not real, but the human brain would respond to perceived danger regardless of its reality. Sarah's physiological response was immediate and dramatic. Her adrenal system flooded her body with hormones. Her pupils dilated, her muscles tensed. But most remarkably, her genetic scans showed activation in sequences Zelthion had labeled as dormant junk DNA. They were waking up, expressing proteins whose functions he could not identify. What are you feeling right now? Zelthion asked, his scientific objectivity overcome by curiosity. Sarah's voice had changed, become harder and more focused. Threat assessment. Calculating escape routes. Identifying potential weapons. Preparing for violence. But you know the threats are not real. My conscious mind knows. My body does not care. Humans evolved to react first and analyze later. The ones who stopped to think about whether the predator was really dangerous got eaten. The ones who ran survived to pass on their genes. Zelthion ended the stress test and was about to move to the next scenario when something unexpected happened. The genetic changes that had activated during the stress test did not immediately deactivate. Instead, they stabilized. The awakened gene sequences continued expressing proteins, as if Sarah's body had decided these functions were worth maintaining. Dr. Chen. How do you feel? Sarah rolled her shoulders and stretched her neck. Fine. Better than fine. Actually, clearer, more alert. Your genetic expression has changed permanently. Sequences that were dormant are now active. This should not be possible without evolutionary pressure across generations. Maybe human genetics work differently than you expect. Before Zelthion could respond, alarms began shrieking throughout the ship. Red emergency lights flashed, and Commander Varthus's voice boomed over the intercom. All hands to battle stations. Multiple human vessels detected approaching at high velocity. They are not responding to hails. Zelthion stared at Sarah, who smiled for the first time since her capture. I told you we were coming. The scientist's training warred with his survival instincts. He needed to continue his research. But the ship was under attack. He made a decision that would change everything. Come with me. You may be valuable as a hostage. He deactivated the neural suppression collar and gestured for Sarah to follow. She did. But as they moved through the corridors toward the command center, Zelthion noticed something disturbing. Sarah was not moving like someone who had been sedated, stressed, and confined for over a day. She moved with energy and purpose, her eyes tracking everything around her, her mind clearly processing tactical information. The genetic activation from the stress test had done something to her, made her more capable, more dangerous. They reached the command center to find organized chaos. Krithian officers shouted status reports, while Varthis studied tactical displays, showing 3 human vessels in attack formation. They were smaller than the Krithian ship but moving with coordinated precision that suggested military training. Hail them again, Varthis ordered. Tell them we will execute prisoners if they attack. One of the communications officers looked up with confusion. Commander, they are not responding to standard channels, but they are transmitting on an emergency frequency. It appears to be music. Music? Varthis turned to Sarah. Explain this. Sarah listened to the audio feed that had been routed to the command center speakers. A human voice sang in English, over a driving rhythm. The lyrics were about rebellion, freedom, and fighting against oppression. She recognized the song. It was over 200 years old, from Earth's early space age, and it had become something of an anthem for human military forces. They are telling you they are not here to negotiate, Sarah translated. That song is played before battles. It is a psychological warfare tactic. They want you to know they are coming, and that they are not afraid. Varthis's scales rippled with anger. We have superior firepower. Those ships are outmatched, probably. But humans do not always care about odds. Sarah moved closer to the tactical display, studying the approaching vessels. She recognized their configuration. Fast attack ships, designed for hit-and-run operations. They were not trying to win a direct engagement. They were trying to cause enough damage and chaos to create an extraction opportunity. For her, the first human ship opened fire, and the Krithian vessel shuddered under the impact. Energy shields absorbed most of the damage, but the intensity of the assault was greater than expected. The human ships were punching above their weight class, using concentrated fire on specific sections of the Krithian defenses. They are targeting our shield generators, one officer reported. Pattern suggests they have detailed knowledge of Krithian ship architecture. Zelthion moved beside Sarah, his compound eyes wide with understanding. You gave them that information. Before you were captured, you transmitted intelligence to your military. I transmitted everything I learned during my time in this sector, Sarah confirmed. Ship movements, communication protocols, tactical patterns. That is what civilian researchers do when operating near potential hostile forces. We observe and report. Varthis spun toward her. You are a spy. I am a scientist who takes notes. Not my fault if my government finds those notes useful. The Krithian commander raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the ship lurched violently. A massive explosion rocked the hull as human munitions penetrated the weakened shields. Emergency systems engaged, and artificial gravity fluctuated, sending unsecured personnel stumbling. Sarah maintained her balance with ease, and in the moment of confusion, she acted. She grabbed a fallen officer's sidearm from the floor and fired 3 precise shots, not at people, but at critical control consoles. Tactical displays exploded in showers of sparks. Navigation systems went dark. Chaos multiplied as the Krithian crew struggled to respond to both external attack and internal sabotage. Zelthion dove for cover, but Sarah was already moving toward the exit. Varthis fired at her, but she had anticipated the shot and was not where he aimed. She returned fire, not trying to kill but to create fear and confusion. More consoles exploded. Smoke filled the command center. Through the smoke, Sarah made eye contact with Zelthion one last time. Tell your superiors something, Doctor. Humans have been in space for less than 200 years. We are young, weak, and small compared to galactic powers. But we learn fast. And we never forget. If the Krithian Empire wants peace with humanity, you will release all prisoners and withdraw from contested space. If you want war, you will get it. And it will be unlike any war you have fought before. Then she was gone, vanishing into smoke and emergency lighting. Alarms shrieked. The ship shuddered under continued assault. Zelthion heard weapons fire in the corridors as Sarah fought her way toward whatever extraction point the human ships had planned. He crawled to a functioning console and pulled up the genetic data he had been collecting. Even in the chaos, even facing possible death, his scientific mind needed to understand. He reviewed the activation patterns triggered by the stress test, the rapid genetic reorganization, the enhancement of physical and mental capabilities, and he understood. The dormant sequences in human DNA were not random. They were adaptive response programs. Humans did not just inherit fixed traits. They inherited the ability to activate new traits when necessary. Their genetics were not a stable blueprint. They were a toolkit that could be modified in real time based on environmental necessity. It explained everything. Why humans seemed weak but fought above their capabilities. Why they adapted so quickly to new environments. Why they learned from failure and improved with each generation. Human evolution had been accelerated by whoever engineered them, given flexibility that allowed behavioral and even biological changes within single lifetimes. They were designed to survive. Not in any one environment, but in all environments. Not against any one threat, but against all threats. And if pushed hard enough, if threatened sufficiently, those dormant genetic programs would activate and produce humans with capabilities that no one could predict. Varthus appeared through the smoke, his weapon drawn but his attention on the tactical display. The human ships are retreating. They recovered their operative and are leaving the system. Did we damage them? Minimal. They accomplished their objective with acceptable losses. The commander turned to Zelthion. Your analysis, Doctor. What did you learn about these creatures? Zelthion looked at the data scrolling across his screen, showing genetic patterns that would take years to fully understand. I learned that we should not have taken one of them prisoner, and that whoever created humanity millions of years ago designed them for one specific purpose. What purpose? To spread, to adapt, to survive against any opposition. Commander, I believe humans are a seed species, created to be scattered across the galaxy and to thrive wherever they land. Their genetic flexibility is not a flaw, it is their greatest strength. Give them a hostile environment, and they will adapt to it. Give them a challenge, and they will overcome it. Give them an enemy, and they will learn to defeat it. Quote. Varthus stared at the empty space where the human ships had been. Then what do we do about them? Zelthion saved his data and stood, his legs unsteady from adrenaline and fear. We make peace, Commander. Because if humanity is what I believe they are, then every conflict with them only makes them stronger. They learn from war. They adapt to opposition. Fighting them is teaching them how to fight us. The only way to win is not to play. But even as he said the words, Zelthion knew it was too late. The Krithian Empire had already chosen its path. Intelligence reports indicated multiple human captures across different systems. Other scientists were conducting similar experiments. Military forces were preparing for potential conflict. Humanity was being pushed, tested, and threatened. And if Zelthion's analysis was correct, that was the worst possible strategy. Because everything that did not kill humanity only made it stronger, more capable, and more dangerous. Across the galaxy, on hundreds of human worlds and stations, similar genetic activations were beginning to occur. Dormant sequences waking up in response to the growing threats humanity faced. New abilities manifesting in individuals who did not understand why they suddenly thought faster, moved quicker, or perceived patterns others missed. Humanity was evolving again. Not over millions of years, but over decades. And the galaxy was about to discover what humanity had been designed to become. On the human attack ship, Sarah Chen sat in the medical bay while a field medic treated her injuries. They were minor, superficial. Her body had already begun healing itself with efficiency that surprised even the experienced military doctor. "You got lucky," the medic said, applying synthetic skin to a burn on Sarah's arm. Sarah shook her head. "Not lucky. Prepared." She had known capture was possible, and had trained for it. Had known torture and interrogation were likely, and had developed mental resilience to withstand them. Had known escape might require violence, and had maintained combat skills despite her civilian status. Because that was what humans did. They prepared for the worst and hoped for the best. They planned for failure and worked toward success. They accepted risk, but minimized danger through training and preparation. The ship's captain entered the medical bay, a stern woman named Rodriguez who had commanded 3 successful extraction operations. "Dr. Chen, your intelligence package is being transmitted to Fleet Command." The data on Crithian ship vulnerabilities alone was worth the risk. "But I need to know, did they discover anything about human genetics that we need to worry about?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "They discovered we are designed to adapt. They discovered our DNA is engineered. They discovered we get stronger under pressure. All things we already suspected. What they did not discover is who created us or why. That secret remains safe." "Good. Because if the galaxy learns that humanity might be a bioweapon created by some ancient civilization, they would unite to destroy us." "I know. That is why only a handful of people in the entire government know the truth, and why we volunteers allow ourselves to be captured. We control the narrative. We let them discover some truths while hiding others. We appear weak while gathering intelligence. We play the role of the struggling underdog while preparing for the day we become something more." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "The dormant sequences, are they really activating?" "Yes, slowly, but measurably. Each generation of humans shows new capabilities that the previous generation lacked. Enhanced pattern recognition, improved threat assessment, increased stress tolerance. We are becoming what we were designed to become. Whatever that is." The captain turned to leave but paused at the door. "Dr. Chen, what if we were designed to be conquerors? What if our creators made us to spread across the galaxy and dominate other species?" Sarah lay back on the medical bed and stared at the ceiling. "Then we make a choice to be something different. Because that is the other thing that makes humans special. We can choose. We can look at our own nature, recognize what we are, and decide to become something better. Genetics might determine potential, but culture and choice determine reality." "You really believe that?" "I have to. Because the alternative is accepting that we are slaves to ancient programming. And humans do not accept slavery. Not from others. And not from our own genetics." Rodriguez smiled slightly. "That is why you volunteered for the capture program. Not just to gather intelligence, but to prove humans can overcome their own nature. Something like that. Now, if you will excuse me, Captain, I need rest. Being captured, interrogated, experimented on, and staging a violent escape is exhausting work." As Sarah closed her eyes and let sleep claim her, her body continued its work. Cells repaired damage. Neural pathways reorganized. Genetic sequences adjusted to the day's stresses and experiences. She was changing, like all humans were changing, becoming something new while remaining fundamentally herself. And across the galaxy, young humans on dozens of worlds were learning the same lessons Sarah had learned. That they were strong because they chose to be. That they were capable because they trained to be. That they were survivors because they refused to be anything else. The galaxy had analyzed human DNA looking for secrets and weaknesses. They had found neither. Because the secret was not in the genes, it was in the choice. And humans had chosen long ago to be indomitable. Whatever they had been designed to be, humanity would become it on their own terms. They would adapt, overcome, and thrive. Not because ancient programming told them to, but because they decided to. Because that was what humans did. They looked at impossible odds and said, "Not today." They faced threats that should have destroyed them and found ways to survive. They accepted their nature as a designed species and chose to make that design their own. And if the galaxy wanted to test humanity's limits, they would discover that humans had none. Because limits were just another challenge to overcome. And humans loved overcoming challenges. That was their secret. That was their strength. That was why they would survive and thrive no matter what the universe threw at them. Not because they were engineered to be superior, but because they refused to be anything less than extraordinary. And no amount of DNA analysis could reveal that truth. Because it was not written in genes. It was written in culture, in stories, in the collective determination of a species that had climbed from caves to stars and had no intention of stopping there. The younglings obeyed their human queen not because of genetic programming, but because she had earned their respect through action and choice, and that made all the difference.